And I believe he really believed that. The war is going on because of Poroshenko. He didn't really see that the real cause of the problem is not Poroshenko, but Putin.
There were some early signs that the approach might bear fruit. I was at the airport in Kiev as a prisoner exchange took place. Zelensky was alongside the plane, giving the captives a hug and welcoming them home.
We have to do all the steps to finish this horrible war.
But do you think this is a new chapter in relations between Russia and Ukraine?
I think this is the first chapter.
Kurt Volker was an American envoy to Ukraine, and I travelled with him to the conflict zone in 2018. He says that in Zelensky's first few months in power, he believed there was a deal to be done with Russia's president.
I remember even in our first meeting saying that I understand you want peace, but Putin doesn't want peace, that this is what he wants to do. He's attacking Ukraine on purpose. It's not for lack of some formula. He's doing it because he's trying to weaken Ukraine. And I think he was initially skeptical of that. But I think as he tried to talk with Putin, he tried to do a couple of prisoner exchanges, I think he came to the view that actually Putin is fighting a war that he wants to fight.
Later that year, Zelensky finally got his face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin.
Their arrivals underlined their differences. Ukraine's president working his modest man-of-the-people image. Russia's leader going for full-on power projection. But these talks were the two leaders' chance to seek common ground, to revive a deal on ending Ukraine's conflict that's stalled for 3 years now.
It was in Paris, with the leaders of France and Germany as chaperones.
In eastern Ukraine, troops are still battling Russian-backed fighters, despite multiple ceasefires. 13,000 people have been killed and huge numbers displaced in the past 5 years. But Volodymyr Zelensky was elected promising to end the bloodshed. For that, he said he needed to sit down with Vladimir Putin.
But the discussions were frosty and went nowhere.
The two Vladimirs spent some 90 minutes in bilateral talks too, and tried to sound optimistic at the end of it all.
Paris marked the end point for Zelensky's attempts to strike a deal with Russia. Until this war broke out, Zelensky's time as president was showing some signs of fizzling out. He'd promised a lot, and perhaps understandably was struggling to deliver. His once sky-high ratings in the opinion polls were starting to fall. Close allies from the election campaign, Zelensky had called them his dream team, turned against him. This is Alex Daniluk, Zelensky's first national security advisor, speaking to me in 2020.
Comedian brought incompetent people who now run major government institutions or misrun major government institutions. Therefore, you cannot achieve results. That's it.
So the optimism, the hope of change that existed a year ago, that's over.
I would say that many things are over. For example, promises, by the way, another promises of his was fighting with oligarchs. It's over. I think reforms, window of opportunity is closed.
Ruslan Ryaboshabka was sacked as Prosecutor General after just 7 months. Shortly afterwards, he told me it was for pushing too hard to tackle corruption and take on the powerful oligarchs.
Or perhaps he became tired with all this reform and he decided to be in a more comfortable situation without any bad news, any bad discussions with so-called with reformers. And he chose another options to be in warm bath.
Eventually, Zelensky did try and take some targeted measures against particular oligarchs. But as US envoy Kurt Volker explains, his critics saw it as too little, too late.
Zelensky was too timid. Then he passed this anti-oligarch law that targeted individuals rather than changing the structure of the system. And that was perceived then as unfair by many of them. And so it never really got off the ground.
On the international stage, Zelensky had to learn fast. In a complex plot, that wouldn't have been out of place in his TV series, he was caught up in a very American scandal. Donald Trump tried to use American military aid to pressure Ukraine into investigating his rival, Joe Biden. As Hannah Hopko explains, Zelensky had to walk a political tightrope, maintaining relations with Ukraine's most important ally while avoiding getting sucked into partisan US politics.
For Zelensky, it was important to generate more support for Ukraine and not to be a part of domestic political games. So, of course, lack of experience could create some problems at that time. But this is how he learned what international policy is and how not to be in the trap, how to diplomatically present Ukraine, but not to be used for the interest of somebody.
In September 2019, with rumours of impeachment hearings mounting, Trump released a transcript of a phone call between the two men.
When you have a wonderful meeting or you have a wonderful phone conversation, it was beautiful.
And they then met in front of the media in New York.
I have a feeling that your country is going to do fantastically well.
Donald Trump, who met Volodymyr Zelensky at the UN yesterday, insists that the call was perfect, even though he blatantly asks the Ukrainian leader to investigate his main democratic political rival, Joe Biden.
As Kurt Volker explains, Zelensky's acting skills for once deserted him.
Because of the dynamic in the United States, President Trump kept the meeting going in front of the cameras for about 45 minutes or so. So very difficult to have a serious conversation between two leaders of countries when you're doing so much of it in front of the media. I think Zelensky handled it well, and I think was just saying, okay, we got to get through this period, and then let's see if we can then resume a normal relationship again.
Then on February the 24th this year, everything changed with the start of the Russian invasion. A man who turned to politics just 3 years before was now facing down the world's second most powerful army.
Good evening, everyone. The president is here. We're all here. Our military are here. Citizens are here. We're all here defending our independence, our state, and it will remain so.
By refusing an American offer to evacuate him as the Russians approached, the legend of the wartime leader was born. This war has brought out the very best in Volodymyr Zelensky, whereas President Putin has come across as aloof and distant, Zelensky has seemed very relatable and down to earth, staying with his people in Kiev and staying in touch with video messages. The updates have enabled Zelensky to speak very directly, both to Ukrainians and to people around the world.
This is not just Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This is the beginning of a war against Europe.
At times, the news of atrocities and mass graves were almost unspeakably bleak. And yet, through it all, Zelensky has sought to raise spirits and inspire.
I said that each of us is the president because we're all responsible for our country, for our beautiful Ukraine. And now it turns out that each of us is a warrior in their own place. And I'm confident that each of us will win. Glory to Ukraine.
This guy has a nerve. I mean Zelensky.
This is Professor Gritsak.
The thing is, the first days, it was disaster. It was a stress, depression. And quite of a sudden we see somebody who behaves very different. And he's the president of your country. And this works immensely on Ukrainians. You have a young, smart, charismatic personalities who deliver very simple messages, who basically tell you the truth. And then you see Putin, who is aging, who is hiding somewhere, has this long table, and nobody knows what they're really thinking.
Before this war, Zelensky struggled to get invites to Western capitals. Now barely a day passes without him addressing a parliament or an international organisation.
Today, the Ukrainian people are defending not only Ukraine, we are fighting for the values of Europe and the world.
The messages follow a set path, showing the full horrors of Russia's war on Ukraine, and then demanding that the outside world do more to equip his country to resist.
Ukrainian President Zelensky told the UN Security Council the most terrible war crimes since World War II are being committed in Ukraine, saying what's being revealed in Bucha is also happening elsewhere.
Hannah Hopko.
Everybody saw the picture of Zelensky in Bucha. And can you imagine such a picture of Putin? Never. Zelensky often visits hospitals to see wounded soldiers. He is also visiting Ukrainian families. You can get access to President Zelensky. You could see him everywhere.
The first chapters of the Zelensky story are far-fetched. A comedian and TV president leading a country at war. Russia's size and might mean the odds are still stacked against Ukraine. But given what's happened to Volodymyr Zelensky so far, anything is possible.
Day 52. What can I say? We're strong. We're working. We love. We're proud. We will defeat everyone.
I'm Jonah Fisher, and this has been Zelensky, the Making of a President, on the BBC World Service.
Thank you for listening. There will be more from the documentary podcast soon. The documentary is just one of our podcasts. There are many others to choose from.
Your heart's pumping, adrenaline's going.
Have you ever dreamt you were hiding a dark secret?
I'm so sorry. It's true. The bank robbery stuff is true.
Or wished you could right the wrongs you see around you.
We could hear from others whispering that they're doing the witch hunt. They're hunting women to kill them.
Or wondered if someone you love might be too good to be true.
I thought I was being a little bit crazy, actually.
Walk in the shoes of some extraordinary people with lives less ordinary.
As they share with us their truly remarkable personal stories.
This girl is smart enough to conquer the world in a different way.
Lives Less Ordinary from the BBC World Service.
I was just overwhelmed with emotion.
Search for Lives Less Ordinary wherever you get your podcasts.